Who is here to take over the world? It's not too bad. I was wondering it's going to be a bit more muted than that. But I swear I saw there's a ticket type called Hustlers. Right? And that wasn't a Hustlers response. So I'm going to ask again, who is here to take over the fucking world? Yes! Okay, brilliant. So a lot of people here, I'm sure, including myself, again, are at the start of a journey at which we will learn, grow, and build things that hopefully will make a massive impact on this planet. That's what we all want to do, right? But I'm also curious. I'm curious, who am I going to meet in my next venture? What lessons will I learn? How will I develop, and can I make that impact? So here are some of the lessons from my last experience. I first start by talking briefly about my circumstances before I joined market. It's 2002, and the initial tech wave had come and gone. People weren't really looking to do startups at that point. The press at that time was really focused on all the massive failures that come out from the initial IPO boom. Companies had raised hundreds of millions of dollars in IPOs, but they didn't earn a single dollar in revenues. Does anyone remember Webvan? No? Wow, inside the history. Okay, they had raised $400 million from investors, a who's who list. Goldman Sachs, Sequoia Capital, then they raised another $375 million in an IPO when their revenue was $375,000. Anyhow, at the time, I thought I was going to have a career in finance. I worked at a few banks after graduation and then went traveling for a gap year. Upon my return, I was totally skinned. And to my dismay, there was not many jobs around in the finance industry because they were all retrenching. There was increased regulation and all the scandals from the tech IPO boom had caused them to pull back. Also, bankruptcies like Enron were weighing on the market. I actually had interviewed at Enron for a gas trading role. The woman who interviewed me said in the interview I would spend more time with her than I would with my mother. That was scary. She also said, look around. When you walk out, there are a lot of people around you who are going to be very rich soon. 5 months later, they filed for bankruptcy. So with the economy a little in doldrums, I was doing anything I could for work. I'll never forget the day I got a call about this little company called Market. I was doing a one-day job driving a slightly rickety minibus back and forth between two hospitals in North London. It paid minimum wage, and at the end of the day, I almost wanted to cry. Because after spending all day driving people back and forth on a bus, I had to go and get a bus myself to get back home. So while I was waiting for the bus to fill at one of the hospitals, I got a call about some guys who wanted to start something around pricing and credit derivatives. I thought that sounded a ton better than driving grannies back and forth all day long. So I went along to meet Market. They were based in some random barn in St. Albans. Yes, a barn, where hay and horses normally belong. Of course, in this one, the horses were gone and being replaced with desks. So after meeting Market that week, a bunch of interviews suddenly came along. In particular, I remember a recruiter trying to convince me, why are you talking to this poxy little company that's going to go nowhere? You're joining Deutsche Bank. Of course, he had a role there for me. However, from my meetings with Market, it was clear that the team there was sharp, hungry, and ambitious. They grilled me, and Lance, who was the CEO, still is the CEO, said to me, he wanted someone to come in, take whatever is thrown at them, and come back for more. I love that description. I think it's a great description of what the mindset of a successful entrepreneur is like. I've used it many times myself since. This doesn't mean lose all balance in life. Everyone in the company actually had a life. If your company becomes your whole life, then the pressure to succeed becomes intolerable. Because if it's going to fail, your whole life caves in. You need a bit of a life away from it to maintain perspective. And in fact, I do a lot of my best thinking when I just take a few minutes to step away, get away from it all. Anyhow, I remember thinking after meeting them, that I was really impressed by them. I could believe in this team. I think that is really important. When starting a business, don't compromise on who you're working with. No one is perfect, but do you believe in your partners as much as you believe in yourself? And don't pick people just because you need to get started. Find the right people for your startups, co-founders, and also your first hires. In fact, it's becoming more and more well documented that a lot of startups fail because of founder issues. There's even a startup out there that analyzes the makeup of startups, founding teams, and gives a prediction as to whether they're going to pass, whether they succeed or not. Obviously, with market, that wasn't the case. I knew quite quickly I was going to join them. As you can imagine now, the barn has mythical status within the company, just like garages where HP was starting, bit of background. So, what is market? I don't want to bore you with all this finance stuff, but a bit of context. Market was born out of the need for banks to have better data on credit derivatives. Credit derivatives are not like stocks and shares. They're not traded on a central exchange. Most trades were done on the phone, and at the time, the contracts were just paperwork, faxed back and forth. This lack of infrastructure meant getting data on the value of the derivative was hard. Stock exchanges know the price of shares because all the trades are happening on their platform. They can see the flow, they know what the price is. For credit derivatives, because no such platform existed, it's hard to get the data. And this lack of data was a major constraint on growth of the market. At that time, the banks relied totally on the traders to tell them what the value of each derivative was. They were the ones who were closest to the market and in the flow of buying and selling. Just like the guy selling vegetables in the street market knows better than most what the real value of a cucumber is. But a conflict of interest existed here. The trader's bonus was determined based off of calculations, based off of what the price that they gave to the banks. A big conflict of interest existed here. And this is one of many issues caused by a lack of data. The other main one was that the hedge funds and investment managers who wanted to trade these products couldn't get independent data. They were reliant on the banks to give them the price. There's a big potential to get rich off. So, there's a pressing need for data for the market to grow. Were we the first? Not at all. An established service already existed, but it was very limited, and the owners of the service were very closely tied to the dominant bank in the market at the time. This dominant bank, JP Morgan, was so dominant that they didn't want more transparency. JP Morgan was like the dominant cucumber trader. A huge amount of volume went through them, giving them perspective everyone else could only dream of. Short cucumbers, long cucumbers, fat cucumbers, thin cucumbers. They knew the price of it all better than anyone. So because of JP, this incumbent service was restricted to just once a month and was not giving the data out to anyone except banks. Now, some people would have looked at this and thought, well, how are we going to penetrate this? JP Morgan had so much of the market. This incumbent service is allied to them, has it also known? JP Morgan certainly were not going to play ball with anyone else. They invented credit derivatives. They felt they owned that market. But we went to all the other banks and said, give us your data, and we'll create a data service. Furthermore, we'll sell the data to non-banks and help hedge funds feel more comfortable to trade the market. So although we weren't first, we understood how JP's dominance gave us an opportunity because we understood the market. If you are entering a market you don't know, then make sure you get some advisors or co-founders who do. They will save you so much hassle and time. So, in some areas, banks were really keen to support us, and not so in others. I, in particular, learned some really important lessons here selling to businesses. Not everyone in an organization you're selling to is incentivized the same way. Traders definitely didn't want more transparency. It wasn't necessarily that traders were were being dishonest and were reporting prices that were wrong, but the actual process of reporting prices was a big chore for them. And with increased transparency, they had to be better at it. I remember in particular, when we pitched to JP Morgan, all the traders walked out of the room after 5 minutes. The risk managers, however, did want more transparency, as did the senior managers at the banks, and because they understood that the constraints on the market that was caused by the lack of data, and indeed ultimately on their profitability. So we found these senior risk managers, and we found these senior executives. We got them to support us. When you sell into businesses, it is vital to understand and then find who in an organization will want to support you, then also understand their relative power in an organization. Even if they support you and they want your product, can they leverage their status in an organization to get it to support you as a whole? Especially when others might be against what you're trying to do. Sometimes people specifically don't want the change you're trying to bring. It might make their individual lives harder, even if the company overall is better off. A classic example is Kodak. They invented the digital camera, but ultimately it led to their demise because the filmmaking division, which made all the money at the time, was dead set against it. So it let others ultimately take the lead. Now they're bankrupt. Maybe also, at an individual level, some people will become less valuable and important in an organization because your service exists. Sometimes it's just emotional. Imagine you've built an IT system that the whole company is using.
Someone comes along pitching a much better system, but that means scrapping what you've built. How would you feel? So empathy is critical when selling to businesses, just as it is to consumers. Many people make the mistake of focusing solely on the improvements their product can make to a business and pitching it on those terms. But a business is ultimately a collection of people, and understanding the dynamic is important. So make the rational case for it, but you also really need to make the emotional case. Ultimately, it's emotions that drive people's decisions. For market, our emotional appeal was to these risk managers. They were responsible for making sure that the banks are not losing money on their derivative trades. On a rational level, we would say, if you don't know the value of what you're reporting, how can you tell you aren't losing money? That makes sense. But on an emotional level, though, is where we really got through to them. We made sure we understood their life, and the truth of it was that the dynamic between the risk managers and the traders was really tough for them. The traders ruled the roost. They brought in all the cash. They were also the closest to the market, as I had mentioned, and so they knew the value of the derivative better than others. So the risk manager's job, especially those whose job it was to validate what pricing the traders were reporting, was very difficult. They were lower in the hierarchy, and traders treated them badly. They didn't hesitate to abuse the risk managers. So until we came along, the risk managers had little reliable and independent data to properly challenge the traders' prices. They had very little weaponry in their day-to-day battle. We gave them the weaponry they needed. So we managed to get a few banks to say, yes, let's see what you can do here. We focused very much at that point on making sure they did something to support us. Talk is cheap, and people will tell you in many different ways that you have an interesting product all day long. But the problem your product is actually solving, is it meaningful enough that they're actually going to do something about it? Only then do you know. So every time we got a bank to indicate support, we got them to start sending us data. At this point, we weren't asking for them to start paying us money. We hadn't even incorporated, but we did want them to actually show their support. They did it. The fact is that most managers and teams within large organizations, and I'm sure many of you here have worked in large organizations, they have big to-do lists of things they would like to get done. But realistically, only 20 to 25% of it gets done at what they think really matters. Is implementing your product in the other 80%? That's what you're going to find out. So when a potential customer says they want your service, extract a commitment from them in some way. It can be cash or it can be time. For example, spending time with you to help you design your product or building an interface for your product. There's a great book which goes into much more depth on this. It's called The Mum Test by a gentleman called Rob Fitzpatrick. It's a great book which I've been nodding all the way through. So I remember when we actually started sending data back to the banks, no one really cared. I remember the third release of our product. The server went down and we didn't deliver data till 6 o'clock the next day. And we were meant to deliver at 8 a.m. Only one person on the planet bothered to call in when we would have it. A good test sometimes is the value of a value of a service is what happens when you take it away. And we heard crickets. But it was early days. And we also knew banks can be slow to implement things. So we kept pressing on. But did we doubt? If our CEO Lance did, he didn't really show it. But I'm sure he did. We all did. I think doubt is good. I suggest to embrace it. If you're in a startup and you aren't doubting at least a little, then you aren't asking yourself the hard questions you need to ask and answer to figure out if your business is really viable. Doubt makes you evaluate and scrutinize every aspect of your business. And often it only takes one aspect of it not to work for it to fail. It's okay to doubt, just don't let it dominate your thoughts. Anyhow, eventually, we got into our side every major dealer in credit derivatives except JP Morgan. We called them every week. And every week the head of trading would answer and he would swear at us every time and tell us to literally fuck the fuck off. It became a running joke in the company. That guy ended up becoming a board member at the company for 4 years later. So we got him on side. So one advantage about being a startup is, of course, desperation and hunger. And we were hungry. Big established companies simply cannot compete in this respect most of the time against a startup. The employees are just not as incentivized. And it was now, we had to get JP on board. So JP had developed a product with Goldman and Deutsche Bank for identifying derivatives. It was effectively creating the equivalent of a barcode for each one. But it was, and a lot of legal work was required to create each one for reasons I won't bore you with. But it's a critical step for the market to mature. And after a while, they had to sell the product because the other banks didn't want to use a service that was run by their rivals. And for a barcode to work, everyone has to accept it, right? You cannot have multiple barcodes for a product. So they put it up for tender. Moody's, S&P, Reuters, big established companies were bidding for this. They had a track record for successfully running these kind of things already. We didn't have any. In fact, we hadn't even incorporated at this point. But we knew if we could get Goldman and Deutsche Bank on board, then JP Morgan was going to have to talk to us. And that's what we really wanted. So we worked day and night for days to get our proposal out to them. I simply cannot imagine the other firms did this. To them, it's just a nice extra piece of business to bolt on to their already successful business. However, we knew this was an opportunity to secure our future. We couldn't pass it up. So don't always be intimidated by big companies competing with you. A lot of the times your hunger, allied with the right talent, of course, can make the difference. Now, one really important factor in our success was that we didn't just provide our service, we worked hard to make sure we provided added value at every opportunity we could. Banks were sending us their data. What else could we do in terms of feedback that could be useful? We went through their portfolio and we highlighted where they had the wrong company against the derivative. Often it wasn't clear whether it should be Ford Motor Company Limited or Ford Limited the derivative should be against. And getting it wrong could render the derivative worthless. It had happened quite a few times at this point. We constantly thought about ways to add value, and a lot of the time for free, because it built trust and established us as a respected partner in ways that just doing the minimum of what we had promised could not do. So our credit derivative pricing business provided a solid base for the company. Just bear with me. So after that, the banks viewed us as a strategic partner. Our future was assured. The only question was how well we could capitalize on it. Well, we're now listed on NASDAQ and worth around $4.5 billion. I think we've done okay. But when I reflect nowadays about my experience with market, I think about what did I get out of it the most? A lot of people are naturally motivated by the goal, status, success, money, respect. When I was at market, definitely I wanted these things, and I still want them and more. But when I reflect, those aren't the things I valued the most from the experience. Creating something that matters, that didn't exist before, and knowing you contributed to it. Playing a part in building something bigger than yourself, and the shared experiences and friendships that come out of it is what I find most gratifying. I remember walking around the office in 2009. At that point, we had 2,000 people in the company. And I'd walk around and I'd look at all these people and their jobs, and I think, I contributed to this. Felt great. Finally, it's not the days of victory that I treasure the most when it comes to memories. Of course, you need those days of victory. Otherwise, it's no fun being in a startup if every day's a defeat. But I remember definitively the days that we struggled. I remember when we were in the office in the very early days at 2 a.m. trying to solve problems with the data feeds from our banks. We were having these problems every night. One night, I went home and I dreamt that our database had died and our business had gone down with it. I also remember when our first proper non-bank client had a conference call with our head of sales. 65 people dialed into that call from their firm, and they were all grilling him, asking why we could not deliver data on time. And we were really struggling. Also, when we were managing auctions, which all the regulators on the planet were watching, the ECB and the Federal Reserve, and when things were going wrong behind the scenes, somehow we managed to get through it. But the most testing times are my favorite memories. It's when we find out what we're made of, so embrace them, don't shy away from them. Those are the times when you truly find out what you're capable of. That's it.